Hey guys, welcome to Cooking with Class. My name is Chef Gooch. Today we're going to be doing something a lot of fun. It might look a little challenging at first, but I think it's something we could all do at home. We're going to be making a cake. I'm going to show you guys how to decorate a cake and one of my super secret recipes. February is National Cherry Month, so we're going to be doing a chocolate covered cherry cake, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let's get started. First up, let's talk about my super secret cake recipe. It is box cake mix. And everyone laughs at this, but you just can't beat a box cake. However, I don't follow the instructions on box cake mix. So let me share with you my own personal recipe. So I take one box of cake mix. We're gonna add a cup of flour, a cup of sugar, 1 cup of liquid and 1 cup of fat, and 3 eggs. What makes this super versatile is you can turn it into whatever you want. Today our liquid is milk and our fat is sour cream, but you could use for your liquid Coca-Cola, you could use apple juice, orange juice, some sort of fruit juice, another dairy product. Your fat could be sour cream, butter, or oil. For us, because we're doing a devil's food chocolate cake, our flour, we're going to cut it in half and do half a cup of flour, half a cup of cocoa. I'm just using white sugar, but you could use brown sugar. You could replace some of that cup of sugar with some honey or with maple syrup. This thing is super, super versatile. I've used it to make white cakes, wedding cakes, lemon, red velvet, chocolate. So many different things you can do. Really, really easy. So, like I said, my liquids, I've got 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of sour cream. And that sour cream flavor is ideal for that devil's food cake. And then 3 eggs. Whoops. All right, and what's super easy about this, you can just mix it all together. And then we're gonna use the whisk on the stand mixer. We're gonna mix it at low speed for 3 minutes, and then I'll turn the speed up, and we'll mix it at high speed for 3 minutes. I did forget one ingredient, and that is just a pinch of salt, about a teaspoon for this cake recipe. While our cake is mixing, we're gonna go ahead and prep our pans. Now, we got a couple of different pans here that you can use. We're doing a small 6-inch cake. I'm a big fan of this tall, like kind of deep dish cake pan. And I have 2 of these in the oven already. So I can show you that in a sec. But if you have these smaller pans, that's okay as well. This recipe will make 2 of these deep dish 6-inch rounds or 4 smaller. Or it'll do one 9-inch cake instead. So you can play around with it. It's really easy. It puffs up a lot. It's gonna rise quite a bit. So even in this big deep dish pan, I'm only going to fill it about halfway. But I'm going to use all 3 of these. I'll show you what it looks like. We don't have to worry about flour with this. We're just going to grease the sides of the pan, and we're going to use some parchment on the bottom. All right, so the parchment on the bottom, and that's all we have to do there. This has been mixing for about 3 minutes. So we're gonna scrape the sides and crank that speed up to full volume. So if we take a look, we got a lot of stuff on the sides there that hasn't quite got mixed in. There's also some dry product on the bottom. We want to make sure we scrape that up really well. Yeah, quite a bit of dry on the bottom. That's okay. There we go. So we're gonna go highest speed possible. which is also going to whip a little bit of air into this cake. And so it's important that you bake it right away after you mix it. There we go. All right, been about 3 minutes on high speed. So now we're going to portion this in between these 3 different cake pans. Like I said, this cake batter tends to rise quite a bit, so you never want to go more than about halfway on your cake pan. That right there. Try not to shake it or jolt it around too much. It's very tempting to eat all this raw cake batter. It's very tasty. All right. Now let's talk about baking this cake, because it does have a little bit different baking times than normal. This cake, we want to set the crumb. So in order to do that, we're going to bake it at a very low temperature for about 30 to 40 minutes. And the cake will barely rise maybe to the top. Then we're going to turn the temperature up about 25 to 30 degrees and let it bake another 30 to 40 minutes, and that's gonna like set the cake and really firm it up. So I'm gonna start around 300, and then after that 30-40 minutes, I'll turn it up to 325. Let's pop these in the oven. Okay, our cakes are in the oven baking. Let's talk about some of our decoration and our frosting and our filling for our cake. We're gonna make a buttercream, an American style buttercream, which is 1 part butter and 2 parts powdered sugar. So I've got 1 pound of butter here that is room temperature, nice and soft, and then 2 pounds of powdered sugar. I've also got some maraschino cherries that I have strained. I need the juice and I need the cherries. We're gonna chop some of these up to go into the buttercream, and if our buttercream is too thick, normally I would thin it out with a little bit of milk, but instead I'm gonna use that maraschino cherry juice to just add to that cherry flavor. Now the filling on this cake, instead of putting the frosting on the inside, we're going to do a cherry preserve. So we'll make a border with our buttercream frosting to hold that cherry jam or the cherry preserves inside so they don't leak out the side. And then we're also going to decorate the top of the cake with a chocolate ganache. And so I've got here 1 cup of heavy cream. That just now came to a boil, to a scald, and I'm going to pour that on top of 8 ounces of chocolate chips. We're going to let that sit for just a minute before we start messing with it, and let that cream melt that chocolate. And while that's going, I'm going to go ahead and place all this butter into my stand mixer, and I'm going to use the paddle attachment this time. So satisfying plop. It's nice in room temperature, so I don't really have to cut it into pieces or break it up. And we're going to beat this for about, just the butter by itself, for about 1 minute. And we're going to go high speed. All right, butter is nice and creamed. So it's been about a minute. We can take a look at our ganache here. And all we're gonna do, we're gonna start in the very middle. We're gonna do tiny little circles until it starts to come together. And once it becomes silky and smooth, we'll just kind of expand to the outside. You don't wanna use a whisk for this. We don't want any air bubbles. So that's why I'm using just a rubber spatula. So just tiny little circles. You can see it start to come together. We definitely don't need this much ganache, but it's hard to make it in a smaller batch. But this is great for dipping fruit in. All sorts of fun stuff. Dipping cookies in it. Making it into a filling for cookies. You could also let this cool completely. It could be the filling on the inside of a cake. We don't want any lumps. And I'm making this right now. You can make it a day ahead as well. We don't want it to be too hot. We want it to cool down just a little bit, because if it's too hot when it goes onto our buttercream, it'll melt the buttercream and it just kind of slides off and it doesn't look so pretty. So I'm also going to put this into a squirt bottle. You could put it into a piping bag if you have one, or even a Ziploc bag that you cut the corner on to put it on the cake in a minute. Yeah, see, I got a squirt bottle around here. If it's in a squirt bottle, it's really easy. If it gets too cold, you can just microwave it. Yeah, you know, it's February. Everywhere you look, there's chocolate-covered strawberries. I like cherries more than strawberries. This cake is really fun. Whoop. Yeah, it's going to come out great. So we'll just set that aside. We can leave it at room temperature right now, but if you're going to keep it for a couple of days, you can refrigerate it. Let's take a look at our American buttercream. So for this, let's go ahead and get prepped with some of those cherries. We're just going to cut them up. I don't need too many, probably about a third of a cup, really finely chopped. I don't want them to be really big pieces because that's going to have an effect on our buttercream when we're piping it on the cake later and smoothing it out. Uh-oh. That looks good. I'm just going to rough chop these. If you want it to be really fast, you could just throw them into a food processor and get tiny little chunks. We don't have to get real specific about the size. We just want very small pieces. All right, there we go. And this isn't going to add a whole lot of flavor. Really, we just kind of want it to, it's going to be speckled throughout that buttercream, and it's just going to look really nice. This is going to take a lot of scraping the sides of your bowl. So once you've whipped that butter up and it's nice and soft, we've got a nice, supposed to be heat-proof spatula that we will just scrape that butter down. Look, it still works, it's fine. And then I'm gonna add about half of this powdered sugar, about 1 pound. And I typically use unsalted butter when I'm baking, so I am gonna add about a teaspoon of salt to this. Now we're gonna go on low speed because you don't want a big poof of powdered sugar everywhere. But once that powdered sugar gets incorporated, you can up the speed. All right, that first half is nice and incorporated, but there's a little bit of dry spots on the bottom, so we're gonna scrape the bowl again. We'll add the other half and do the same thing. All right, so we got it all nice and scraped down. We'll just add the rest of our powdered sugar. And back on low speed. All right, so we have incorporated all of our powdered sugar. This is really thick, and if we try to spread this on the side of a cake, it's gonna tear the crumb of the cake. So it does need to be a little bit softer, and that's where some of that reserved cherry juice that we have is gonna come into play. So this time I'm gonna scrape really well. I'm even cleaning off my paddle, making sure there's no little chunks of butter. Really getting in there. I'm gonna scrape the whole bowl really well. We're gonna go ahead and add our chopped up cherry chunks that we have right here. And I think I'm just gonna start off with about a tablespoon or so of that reserved maraschino cherry juice. And if I'm lucky, it's gonna dye the cake a beautiful, like pale pink color. All right. All right, let's see what happens. A little bit holding out on me on the top there. Yeah, this is looking great. You're gonna wanna scrape again. The very bottom is still that pale yellow color, but the rest of it's looking amazing. I almost want to also maybe add some, I don't know if I want more cherries, or I could also add some really finely chopped up chocolate. I think that would look nice in there as well. Give some more like chocolate and cherry sprinkles. All right, it's mixed up really well. Let's see if it's the right consistency. We just want it to be really easy to smooth out, and it's looking pretty good. I might need just a touch more of that juice. Let's go ahead and give it a quick taste. Yeah, we're gonna add a little bit more juice and even a little bit more salt, and then we should be good to go. We'll mix that up one last time. Just gonna add about 3 spoonfuls here. All right, I've added some extra cherry juice, 3 or 4 spoonfuls, and then I'm also gonna add some vanilla, because vanilla is kind of like the salt in the pastry world. We've got about a teaspoon right here, and that'll help thin it out as well. All right, that's looking really good. Super smooth, very spreadable for our cake. The color is nice. It's gonna pair really well with that deep chocolate color from the ganache. So we're about ready to start on our cake. All right, so we've got our ganache ready, our buttercream is made. Last, let's do our filling. You could definitely use either that ganache or that buttercream as a filling for this cake, but we're gonna go with these cherry preserves. So I've got a piping bag. You don't have to have a piping bag, it's just really easy for me. You could also just spoon them onto the cake, or you could put them into a Ziploc baggie. This is nice, there's big chunks of cherry in these preserves. And I'm just gonna put most of this jar in here, and then I'll just save the jar and put whatever I don't use back in there. Set that aside. So we've got this ready. We've got our ganache. Let's take a look at our cakes. So here I've got 2 cakes that I baked earlier today in the deep dish pans that I was telling you I like so much. This cake looks great. What we're looking for, you can test your cake with a really sharp knife or a toothpick, and you can insert it, and if you pull it out and it's clean, you're good. But what I like to do, I press on the top of my cake when I'm checking it for doneness, and if it springs back, it's done, and if it has also pulled away from the sides. So you can see here where the cake batter starts to caramelize, and it shrinks up and it just pulls away from the edge of the pan. That's what we're looking for, that and that it springs back. So these have been cooled for quite a while. I'm just gonna run a little spatula around the edge to release it, and because we use that parchment, it should come out really nice and evenly. It's a great looking cake. Same thing on this other one. Well, this is a lot of cake. We don't have to use all of it. Yeah, very good. All right. All right, so we've got our big, beautiful cakes. Now, I did use the deep dish cake pans for these. If you had those smaller ones like I baked earlier, those are really easy because all you have to do is get that little hump off the top. So to do this, you're gonna square up in front of your turntable, and we're gonna get our knife nice and parallel, and we're just gonna kind of score the outside to get this little hump off. So we're gonna tilt our head, and we're just gonna keep the knife still and score the top. And then once we make it around in a circle, we hold our knife still. We're just slightly pushing our hand inwards until we make it all the way through, and we have a nice level cake, or level enough, okay? If you do have a tall cake pan like I did, now we're gonna cut this in half. If you have those smaller ones, once you get your hump cut off, you're fine. So let's go ahead and score this one right in the middle, and then once I make it back to the start, we'll just hold it right there and just very slowly just let the knife kind of do its job, and we've made it all the way through. This cake is super moist. You can hear it. It's so moist. It's awesome. Don't forget about your parchment on the bottom. We're going to leave it for now, and we'll remove it in a sec. All right, our cakes have been cut. We have all of our tools. Let's go over what some of those are. So first up, I have a piece of cardboard, and this is going to serve as the base for my cake. This one is not like a decorative border or anything, because I'm going to leave my cake on this board, or I could transfer it onto a plate, whatever I want. To get this to stick and not slide around, I've got a damp paper towel. So we're just going to kind of put that in the middle. I'm going to press on it really hard, and now my cake's not going to slide around while I'm icing it, okay? And then I've got an offset spatula. I really like to use one of these offset spatulas to ice with. It just comes really naturally to me. It's really easy. If you would rather use a straight one, you can. And then I have a bowl scraper. So these are really cheap and they're so useful. It's like 89 cents at the restaurant supply store. They have this nice right angle, which we're gonna use to ice the side of our cake. I also use them a lot to help clean out these bowls because you can really get in there and get every last drop. So really handy tool. Got both of those. What else do we need? I've got a little small offset spatula. We'll use that for the jam. And then I do have a piping bag and a piping tip, and I'll show you what we're gonna do with that at the end. So to get started, we don't want our cake to slide around, so I do put just a little drop of buttercream right in the middle. We're gonna take one of the bottoms of the cake, and it should have the parchment still on it. We're gonna peel that off And in order for it to be as flat as possible, we're going to put the bottom down. We're going to press gently. We want to avoid any crumbs getting in the side of our cake. And this piping bag is going to come in really handy because we want to pipe a little border around our cake where we want to hold in that jam. If I was just going to be putting the buttercream on the inside, I wouldn't have to use one of these. But we don't want our jam to go spilling out the sides from the weight of the rest of the cake. So we'll cut a little hole about 1/2 inch in diameter. When you're using a piping bag, I like to get all the air out and I twist it, and I just want to hold it in one hand comfortably. If you can't squeeze this comfortably, you're going to develop like carpal tunnel, so you can squeeze it a little bit lower where it's easier for your hand to hold. Okay, I can hold it up here, so that's what I'm going to do. And we're just going to make a slight little ring around the outside of the cake. And if it hangs over the edge, that's perfectly fine. Now we'll take our jam, our cherry preserves, cut that tip, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start in the middle though, and there can be a little bit of space. Just kind of piping it on there. That's where I'm going to take this small little offset spatula and just spread it out, spread it to the edge of our buttercream. There we go. So that's one layer done. We just got to do that 3 more times. So now I'm going to save the other bottom of my cake, and we're going to flip that one upside down for the top so it's also as level as possible. This is a pretty big cake. I might only do 3 layers. It's pretty, it's going to be pretty tall. I don't know, 4, the taller cakes do look really nice though. Maybe we'll do all 4. You do whatever feels comfortable. Same thing, let's pipe a little ring to protect our jam. Spread our cherry preserves out. Let me get over here on this side and show you. I'm just going to do a little ring. So we're going to take this bowl scraper and just going to go around. We added a lot of icing. We're going to end up scraping some of it off. That's okay. And I think what I might do, I might pop this into the fridge or the freezer for about 10 minutes. And that's going to allow me to let this kind of, the butter in there chill. And when I put the ganache on there, it's going to slow it down so it doesn't run all the way to the bottom. And we have a little more control. So I'll be right back. So there's a couple of things you could do with the chocolate. You could do the entire top, but I don't really like that. I just kind of want to do like, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of the way around. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start right on the edge. And I just keep squeezing until I kind of create like a little drip coming down the side there. So now we have our naked drip cake. We need something on the top. So I'm going to take and just pipe a couple of little rosettes. These are really easy. You're just going to pipe a real small little circle back on top of itself. All right, there you have it, guys. That is my chocolate covered cherry cake. Before we end today's episode, I want to introduce one of my sous chefs that's been running around, one of my students. So Katie is a junior at Talkington School for Young Women Leaders. She's one of my competition students. She's practicing right now for a competition we have coming up really soon called Skills USA. She made some cream puffs and some eclairs and then also an apple galette. They look really good. All right, well, thanks for coming and making this cake with me. Thanks for gorging with Gooch.
This has been a production of the students and staff at Lubbock ISD TV.